Are you starting to suspect that Marvel Comics has really no idea what its fans are looking for or what they expect out of a comic book or what their reaction is going to be? I'm starting to feel that way. The events surrounding Amazing Spider-Man number 26 have really kind of made me wonder whether or not Marvel even knows what its audience is thinking. Let's talk about it in this video. Hi, I'm Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd, and the news and events surrounding this comic book have really kind of made me reinforce something I've been suspecting for a while. This is by no means a hot take. I know a lot of people feel this way and have felt this way for a long time, but I'm starting to cement my opinion that Marvel editorial really doesn't understand what its fans want or how they're reacting to the content that they're producing. I want to catch you up to speed if you're kind of wondering what this is all about. In an interview with Popverse, Zeb Wells, the current writer of Amazing Spider-Man, made a comment near the end of the interview that basically said that Marvel has warned him, Nick Lowe specifically, an editor at Marvel, has warned him not to make appearances at conventions following the release of Amazing Spider-Man 26. Following that interview, we basically discovered that there's going to be a death in Amazing Spider-Man 26, and I'm going to provide a very small spoiler for that issue that just came out, but keep in mind that Marvel themselves spoiled this, so I don't think it's a big one. So unless you're reading Spider-Man month to month, maybe wait to come back in that case if you haven't read this one yet, but otherwise I think you're probably safe to talk about this. And what happened in that issue is we find out that Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, dies in that comic book. So that's a bit of a head scratcher for people because there is a movie coming out pretty soon. She had her Disney Plus series, and she's going to be appearing in the Marvels with Brie Larson and with Captain Rambeau and all this stuff. So we have a lot of stuff going on with her character right now. It just seems kind of odd timing to kill her in the comics. Although that's not unprecedented. We've seen other characters die shortly before their MCU debuts before, only to be brought back for part of the hype, blah, blah, blah. None of that's really too surprising, which ties into why I think the point of this video is just so interesting to me. So Marvel Editorial is telling their writer, don't do convention appearances. Now, here's the one thing that I'll throw out. That could have just been a joke. I think people kind of latched onto that, myself included, when they see the headlines about that. It could have just been a joke. But even if it's a joke, something that they thought was funny in-house, let's analyze that for a second. They assumed that the death of Miss Marvel was going to be a big enough deal to move the needle to the point where people would care and have some kind of reaction towards it, whether it's hating Zeb Wells or being frustrated with the comic book. Even if it's a joke, there had to be some basis there for that to really carry any weight as a joke, right? So here's what I'll say. Look, when this was going to happen, myself, a lot of other people had these theories. The obvious, to me, red herring was Mary Jane. No pun intended, since she's a redhead. A lot of people thought Mary Jane was going to die. There were people that, said other characters that have been a part of his life for a while might die. I heard a lot of Foggy Nelson. I heard a lot of, people said maybe Captain America because he's kind of a friend to everybody in Marvel. So a long-standing character, a character who's been involved in Spider-Man for a very long time, a really close friend. There were people that thought, hey, maybe it's a misdirection and it's going to be a new character like Spider-Boy, Bailey, Miles, all these different characters that people thought could die. Of course, you have people thinking like Aunt May or just all these different things, right? And it turns out it's none of those. It's really a character who has very little connection to Spider-Man, really, and it's somebody who also, frankly, is not an A-list character to begin with. I'm not trying to cast any shade on Miss Marvel. I think her appearances have been pretty fun throughout her time in the comic books. I'm excited to see her on the silver screen, but look, she's not Spider-Man. She's not, somebody in the Spider family, traditionally speaking. She's not one of those characters that's really going to, in my opinion, kind of move and shake the Marvel Universe. Remember, this is comic books. Characters die all the time. So all this really tells me, at least, is that, something crazy was going to happen in this comic book. Like, one of the theories I had was that, maybe Peter, in the line of him trying to be a superhero, kills somebody. That would be an interesting story to tell. Whether or not he had to do it for the greater good, or it happened by mistake, maybe. This was also, by the way, this is the anniversary of Gwen Stacy's death. So there was kind of like this thought process that maybe there would be some mirror storytelling or some circular storytelling kind of there going on. And one thing you could see happening is perhaps Peter accidentally kills somebody. Much like Green Goblin kind of inadvertently caused the death of Gwen Stacy. Obviously it's Spider-Man's web that breaks her neck, but you could kind of a similar event to that happen again, right? So you could see some kind of parallels there, but I thought maybe somebody who is maybe important in a way we don't realize, or a child, that would be really dark. But again, I'm trying to think what would cause fans to have such a major backlash against everything that's happening in Spider-Man that they'd be upset. And it makes sense. A lot of people guessed Mary Jane because of that, because that's something that, there's been a pretty controversial storyline with her recently in the Amazing Spider-Man comic books, and kind of, Peter and Mary's relationship over the last, oh God, probably 15, 20 years at this point. Especially ever since, the whole retcon situation with One More Day and all that stuff. It's been a long road since we're getting here. And Spider-Man is just a character that is very problematic for Marvel right now. I feel like nobody seems to be getting it right. And I'm not even commenting, like the overall Zeb Wells storyline. I'm not currently reading Amazing Spider-Man. I haven't enjoyed a lot of Amazing Spider-Man stuff for a very long time. The last Spider-Man stuff I read was Superior Spider-Man, and then I loved a lot of J. Michael Straczynski's run on Spider-Man was pretty good, up to certain points. But that was going back a long time there. I haven't been reading it because I feel like a lot of the good Spider-Man stories are classic stories that have already been told. Like my favorite jam is the X-Men, and I keep coming back to the X-Men. And I have to admit that most of my favorite X-Men stories are in the past. I don't know if that's sheerly because I read a lot of them when I was a kid and they left an impression, or if that's actually they were better stories, or whatever you want to call it. I tend to think it's the latter. But I still do occasionally come back to X-Men because it's my favorite, because I love to kind of dip my toe. And I know a lot of Spider-Man fans where Spider-Man's their favorite character, and they want to kind of come back and see if that character has grown, changed, or if the stories have gotten any better or more interesting, more relatable, whatever it might be. And it just feels like Marvel is struggling to get anything right with Spider-Man in the comic books. And that sort of indicates a larger problem that Marvel's having in general, where Marvel just seems to have this issue with creating compelling content around some of their core characters, the Avengers, the X-Men, Spider-Man. It's a real problem. And there's a lot of reasons that people like to attribute to that, and I'm sure people will talk about those in the comments, and that's stuff we'll talk about in other videos. But essentially, I feel like Marvel has lost its touch with its readers, and I think that this is a really strong indicator of why that's happened. Them thinking that this would be some kind of big event, and to kind of put a cap on what the actual reaction was to this. People thought it was stupid. Now, admittedly, it came out early. It's kind of tough to tell whether or not that was by design. They wanted some extra press on this book, and so they helped leak it. Whether or not it leaked, and so they decided to go wide with the story, like Entertainment Weekly ran a story about it, for example, and they had high quality screenshots and everything, so like actual renders, a digital copy of the book, and not just blurry photos, which you saw on some other websites. So it really makes me wonder, what was the intention here? Was it to intentionally leak the book, or did that just kind of happen because somebody did leak it and they said, well, we got to come out and kind of, attack this one sooner than we planned? Because if people read the storyline naturally and it kind of came out on New Comic Book Day and people started talking about it, maybe it would have a different impact for people. I don't think it really would have made that much of a difference. I think that this kind of stole some of the wind from its sails, because everyone's like, well, we know who dies now. And that death isn't something that's probably interesting to a lot of Spider-Man fans. Something to consider. So what are your thoughts on how this whole situation played out? This is kind of probably my last time talking about it. I talked about it in a couple live streams, and now we're kind of full circle with the story actually being out and everything now. How did you feel about it? Let me know in the comments down below. On your way down to the comments, you can consider becoming a channel member, which does support me. All my channel members are up on the screen right now, and I just want to take a second to thank them for everything they do. Thank you so much. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching this video, and until the next one, I want to remind you, as always, hey, 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 hey. Read comics every day.